Thank you so much for joining us today in person and online. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Michelle Donnelly. I am the Evelyn and Will Kaplan Curator of 20th Century Art in the John Roden Collection here at PAFA, and I'm delighted to welcome you to Art at Noon today. So before we get started, I just want to share some information about our brand new Fine Arts Certificate program here at PAFA. The certificate program is a 3-year career training program designed to prepare students for entry-level professional roles within the visual arts and related creative industries. We are currently accepting applications for the 2026 fall term, and Haley Balderson, our admissions counselor, is on hand here to answer any questions. She's in back waving her hand. Thank you, Haley. And it's now my pleasure to introduce Bo Bartlett. And he himself earned a certificate here at PAFA in 1980. Bo credits his rigorous training at PAFA for enabling him to develop a distinctive vision of contemporary American experience. One of his works in PAFA's collections is currently on view in A Nation of Artists, and he's also been included in exhibitions at such institutions as the National Portrait Gallery in Washington, D.C., the Philadelphia Museum of Art, and the Rhode Island School of Design. In addition to PAFA, he is represented in such prestigious museum collections as the Crystal Bridges Museum of American Art, the Asheville Art Museum, the Columbus Museum of Art, and the Frye Art Museum. His recent paintings explore themes of memory, place, and the search for meaning in an ever-changing America. And today he'll be discussing his artistic journey from PAFA and his approach to realism. So please join me in welcoming Bo Bartlett.
Hey, how we doing?
Awesome.
Good to be here, thanks. Thanks for taking time out of your day. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah, that's fine. And thanks to everyone that's online as well. We're live online. Let's see, I have a ton of slides, images, just like a ton. So we're gonna go through them real fast. We're gonna get through it, and then if you have any questions at the end. Do we have an hour, Spencer, Michelle? Do we know? Is that about right, in theory? An hour? All right, we'll try it. Let's see which way we go. Here we go. The purpose of art is to wake us up. I think that the perfect example of that is this Norman Rockwell, because once you're awakened, there's no going back. And in this image, he has discovered in his father's chest of drawers, in the bottom drawer, the Santa Claus costume that his father wears for Christmas. There is no Santa. So he's awakened. I love the little details in this painting, the Rockwell painting. There's that pipe up there, so sort of Rockwell smoked a pipe, but it's also suggestive of the Magritte. This is not a pipe. There are many purposes for art. The religious aspect, this is Da Vinci in Milan. Mythological stories, narratives, which go all the way back in time. Political, this is David's crowning of Josephine. Protest or commentary, this is the Raft of the Medusa. And Courbet's personal and public and private. On one side is the Bohemians, on the others are the sort of bourgeois, and he's in the middle, interior, exterior, inward world, outward world, is sort of an interior of a studio, that's the title, but you see the background is sort of also not just a wall, but a landscape, which he's painting. He's got the muse and the child self there. So the personal and the public presentation. The spiritual, this is Gustav Klimt. It's either medicine or philosophy, I'm not sure which, but either way it was destroyed in World War II in the bombing in Vienna. Guernica, Picasso's Guernica. Duchamp, The Bride's Trip Bear. Rothko. Let Your Root Feed Your Crown. Has anyone read the Cornish Trilogy by Robertson Davies? Excellent, good, great. It's an incredible trilogy. I highly recommend it. Write it down, put it on your book list. Let Your Root Feed Your Crown, I think, comes from What's Bred in the Bone, one of the trilogies. And I think it means let everything that you are, your home, your DNA, your family, your experiences, if we were like a tree, right? We think about the roots going down into the ground or as our roots, and then it flows through us, and then it becomes through our trunk, and then it becomes like our foliage or our greenery or our fruit, and it is the blooming, the flowering of what we show to the world. So let your root feed your crown. And I tell my students this, to let your personal experience, because no one else has your experience. We all have our own personal experiences. So let your experience be the thing that you tell the world, that you show to the world. And then it will have some version of truth in it. A new beginning. You can see the Betsy here is a little girl Betsy, a little muse, my wife Betsy, and a brand new painting, starting a brand new fresh painting. It's inspired by a lot of things, inspired by Norman Rockwell, Vermeer, This Is Not a Pipe by Magritte, Balthus. I grew up in Columbus, Georgia. This is actually Walker Evans' photo taken over in Alabama, but my memory of my childhood home looks like this. I had a paper route, and I'd get the papers at the local little convenient grocery store, and I would deliver those papers. Columbus is famous for being the home of Coca-Cola. We think of it as Atlanta, but actually Dr. Pemberton, who was a Confederate soldier in the war, came up with the cocaine elixir that became Coca-Cola, and he sold it to some guys in Atlanta. But half the Coke stock came back to Columbus when he sold it, so that allowed for the museums and the libraries and the schools and all to prosper by local investment. It's sort of known for being the home of Alma Thomas, the artist Alma Thomas, Ma Rainey, Queen of the Blues, Amy Sherald is from there. And most recently, it's known for being Golden from the book Theo of Golden. My friend Alan Levi wrote this little novel that's #1 on the New York Times bestsellers list. And if you haven't read it, I recommend that too, Theo of Golden. And you should come down and visit, and it's a sweet little town. This is my childhood home. Betsy and I still live here. It doesn't look quite like this anymore, but this is the gist of it. I grew up not knowing much about art. The only thing I knew about art was what came into the house in magazines. So Life magazine or Look magazine or Time or Saturday Evening Post. So I knew about Norman Rockwell, Salvador Dali, Picasso, and Andrew Wyeth. That was sort of the limit of my art knowledge. It's a portrait of my parents. My father was very outgoing, very sort of conservative religious. My mom, and he was sort of English, Scottish, Irish blood, going back to the Mayflower. And my mom was sort of mixed, We called it Indian blood. We always called it Indian blood. But two very different personalities. He was very outgoing. She was very quiet and contemplative. The Norman Rockwell influences. This is a painting that I did called Estrelita. It's it's a Christmas scene, a school scene, and you can see how my youngest son, Elliot, is playing the little angel, the little star, Estrelita. He would go get on the school bus in the mornings, and I would take his lunch. I'd pack his lunch in a little brown paper bag, and I'd draw a little smiley face on it or something, and send him off into the school day, father and son. When I was growing up, football was the thing. It was almost like a religion, and this is Vince Lombardi, probably with the Green Bay Packers, I think. But religion and football were sort of the things in the South. That's what I grew up with. So I combined this image, a kind of holy family of a football player and a homecoming queen. My sister was the homecoming queen at Columbus High School, and I sort of looked up to that as the highest possible achievement. Here's a larger version of the painting with the bonfire. And this is, I didn't just stick my son Will as the football player and his girlfriend Jackie. They posed for it, but it was really my sister, a version of my sister, and her boyfriend Bobo that I was nicknamed after. I got his name. She was 16. I was just a little kid. But in the painting, I included the whole court, and I included all of my old high school girlfriends in the. It was the 60s, and this is Kennedy and Jackie at Love Field. You see how the flowers that she's holding was just the way that Jackie's holding the flowers here. I'd go hunting with my father. My father would take us hunting early in the morning. He would take my brother and I, sometimes just myself, and we would go and would sit in his International Harvester. We'd go out, drive out as far as we could, out toward Fort Benning, out toward Casita. First, we would have stopped at Huddle House and gotten like an egg sandwich. And we'd go out and we'd sit and we'd listen to Patsy Cline on the radio or Hank Williams. And it would be cold and we'd be shivering. And he would be telling me about how to shoot the deer if I saw one. And he'd say, placement is everything. And what he was talking about was where to put the bullet. You want to shoot it just above the front legs. But placement is everything became the sort of mantra for myself when I worked up this composition of me hunting with my father. And it's actually, I posed as my father and my son Emmanuel posed as a young me. One time, one of my sister's boyfriends brought a deer into our house, actually dragged it across the living room floor. Back then in the news, Columbus was a tiny town, a very small town, and there wasn't much news. And so if you shot a deer, you could actually like put it on top of your truck and drive it down to the Ledger Inquirer building and they'd photograph you with it. And that would be the news the next day. You know, Bill Bartlett shot a deer. You know, that was news. There wasn't much to talk about. Those were the good old days. But here you can see how this is sort of, again, like a sort of Holy Family or a American Gothic kind of thing. But he's holding the gun in a way that's similar to the famous Lee Harvey Oswald photo of holding the rifle. We'd sit and watch the news, black and white TV, and we'd eat our mashed potatoes and green peas and watch the footage from Vietnam that day. This is the famous nude photo of the napalm girl. I would sit in church on Sunday mornings and draw on those little envelopes, the back of the little offertory envelopes, with one of those little pencils that didn't have an eraser, the short little church pencils. And, it was embossed with the name of the church, Eastern Heights Baptist Church. And I would sit there and draw the stories that the preacher was preaching. And I would just listen and draw and listen and draw. And that was the way I took in the information. So this is sort of my grown-up version of that idea. It's called Damascus Road. It's about some version of divine intervention. You see that wrap. The wrap shows up in a lot of my paintings. It's the wrap that the slaves wore in Michelangelo's sculptures and paintings. So it's a wrap which suggests both deposition, crucifixion wrap, and a slave wrap. There's the Edmund Pettus Bridge on the left. Selma is not far from my hometown. There's Martin Luther King the day he was shot. Bloody Sunday. And then Lee Harvey Oswald the day he was shot by Ruby when he was being transferred in Dallas. These things get added together and made up into all part of my psyche, get put together into compositions and paintings. So this is Madre del Nene, mother of the boy, mother of the child. So sort of two halves of the self, the masculine and the feminine. I had read, My Name is Asher Lev. Has anyone read that? Chaim Potok? I'm going to put it on the list. It's really good. Highly recommend. My Name is Asher Lev. It's sort of, I read in high school. My English teacher, I didn't read many books in high school. I was sort of ADHD or whatever that is. And I was like looking at all the spaces between the letters instead of like actually reading the words. Like it's all so beautiful the way it be typeset. Anyway, so and then I learned eventually I was supposed to read those words and they made sense. My Name is Asher Lev was a book about a Hasidic Jewish boy who was dealing with his religion, and they weren't supposed to make graven images. And so, but he wanted to be an artist and wanted to be a figurative artist. And so in the story, he goes to Florence to study. Now I was 18 and knew nothing about how to become an artist. There were no artists to show me the way, very few. And so after reading the book, I decided to go to Florence at 18. In the book, his famous painting, Asher Lev, who's a fictional character, his famous image is a Brooklyn crucifixion, a contemporary crucifixion. So that's sort of what I was being inspired by here. So at 18, I went off to Florence. I was studying and I was drawing the sculptures in the piazzas, and I wound up meeting Ben Long, who was an American painter from North Carolina, who was studying with Pietro Annigoni. And I was learning how to draw from him. And it was just a fortunate meeting. And so I'd been there for a while when I got a letter from, this was 1974, I got a letter from my high school girlfriend that said she was pregnant. So I had planned on just living in Europe for the rest of my life. I figured that's what I would do, is go be a street artist or something. And you know, it was pre-internet, and you didn't email or text back and forth. You know, you wrote letters. And so I'd write a letter saying, well, that's interesting, and that would take 2 weeks to get there. And then she'd write back 2 weeks later, take a month for the correspondence. And so anyway, it turned out, eventually I realized I was going to be going back to America, to Georgia, and getting married. At 18. And but before I left, I got a list of artists. On the left here is Annigoni's wonderful fresco, and on the right is Ben Long's crucifixion, which is in North Carolina, Blowing Rock, North Carolina. No, I'm not Blowing Rock, Beaver Creek, North Carolina. And so I got in this list of artists from Ben and his friends, and they said that there were 10 artists in America that were painting realistically. 1974. And so it was a very short list. Andrew Wyeth was top of the list. Nelson Shanks was on the list. And it went on down. There were not many people that were doing it. And so when I got back to Georgia and got married and with a child, moved to Philadelphia and started to look for these artists, two of which were in the area, Andrew Wyeth and Nelson Shanks. I actually called 411, you could do that back then, and got on the phone and said, do you have the phone number for Andrew Wyeth? And the operator said, yes, we do. And she gave me the phone number, and I called him up and called Andrew Wyeth on the phone. And I said, hey, it's Bo Bartlett, I want to study with you. And he was like, oh, I don't take students, and but you can come out tomorrow and visit. So I did. I borrowed a friend's car. I didn't have a car. Borrowed a friend's car, drove down to Chad's Ford, and went to Hanks, Route 1 and Route 100. I said, where is Andrew Wyeth? And they pointed me down toward the mill down Route 100. And so I drove down there and drove down the long driveway in my little yellow Toyota Corolla that I had borrowed. And I drive down and pull in and, you know, knock on the door, and Betsy Wyeth opens the half barn door, the wonderful half door, and I frightened her because it's 1975 5, and I look like Rasputin. My hair's all out here, and my beard is super long, and it's the hippie days. And I terrified her, and she wanted to just slam the door back, but I said, Andrew Wise said I could have a meeting with him. And she said, well, he's not here, and I don't know where he is. And I was like sort of jilted, but I think thinking back on it, it was 1975, and he was probably off painting Helga somewhere, and she probably really didn't know where he was. So I felt a little jilted, but I decided that I would just leave there. If I'd known he was at a studio over across Route 1, he'd have been in a studio, but I didn't know that, and Hanks didn't tell me, so I didn't find him that day, 1975. And instead I went out and found Nelson Shanks up in New Hope, Pennsylvania, and studied privately with Nelson. I had enrolled in school. I didn't just come to Philadelphia with no plan whatsoever. I had enrolled at PCA for a year. And it wasn't going so well. All the cool kids I found out, were over at PAFA. And so I transferred over to PAFA. But while I was at PAFA, I found Nelson, so I was sort of doing two things at once. I was sort of moonlighting. I was going to school during the day. My instructor, Arthur DaCosta, who was a great painter, I said I wanted to leave school and just go study privately with Nelson. And Arthur was nice enough and smart enough to encourage me not to leave school. He said, just go do it. Just go do it and stay enrolled. So it was great advice for all the obvious reasons. But I spent 2 years with Nelson. I spent every day side by side with him. He had one new student and one experienced student. One had been there for 2 years, one had been there just for a year. So he kept each student for 2 years, and they would cycle through. And he didn't have to say anything because there was a lineage, and the one that was new learned everything from the one that had been there for 2 years. And he had a model, in the morning a portrait, in the afternoon a nude model usually, a figure model. And we would just watch him paint, and we learned to paint just by watching. No words were exchanged that I recall ever, until my very last day. And when he said to me, I came in, he said, Bo, today is your last day. That's all I remember Nelson Shanks ever saying to me. But he taught me how to paint. When I got out of school, got out of the Pennsylvania Academy and got finished with Nelson, I got a studio down at 8th and Chestnut in the jewelry district there. And it was a great old 4th floor building on Chestnut Street. And I was super poor. I mean, the rent was $100 a month, and it was more than I could afford. And I would go at lunch. I didn't have any money, so I couldn't eat lunch. So I would go over and I would sit in front of this painting, The Gross Clinic by Akins, over at Thomas Jefferson. So I'd go around the corner and sit for an hour, absorb that, I'd get my nutrition, and then go back and keep working on my paintings. While I was at PAFA, one of the biggest influences was Ben Kamahira. There were a lot of great teachers here. There was Will Barnett, there was Arthur DaCosta. Sidney Goodman eventually came my last couple of years. But it was really Ben Kamahira that had made me want to study at the Academy. You can see how this painting is similar to the Balthus painting called The Room, which I had seen this painting, I'd seen the Balthus paintings. When I graduated from PAFA, I won a Crescent Traveling Scholarship, so I was able to go to Europe and study. And so this painting was up in the Venice Biennale. Balthus had a whole exhibition, 1980, I think it was, at the Venice Biennale. So I saw that there was a way to sort of incorporate figuration with a more contemporary or psychological way of thinking about picture making. So I came back, and this was one of the first paintings I did at 8th and Chestnut. I was 21 or 22 years old, and this is my family. This was my family, and it was called Assignation. It was inspired by the Balthus paintings, but also inspired by The Boy Children by Sargent, and which was a huge influence. And Sargent's obviously was inspired by Velasquez, Las Meninas. Here's another painting that I did at that time. These are life-size paintings. Showed them at Marion Locke's gallery. Motet for the day of Pentecost. I was doing these paintings, a lot of figures and chairs. Actually, Marion Locke called them nudes and chairs. And she said, keep painting the nudes and chairs. Everybody was eating up the nudes and chairs. They loved them. And I was doing well and selling well. And I was just a couple of years out of school. But I started to feel an inkling that I needed to do something else and get out and do something different. So I started doing these sort of larger, this thing is really large actually, I don't know, the figures are life-size, I guess. So it's called object permanence. And I started wanting to do something that was outside of the studio. I started with some construction workers, and those were a little Sidney Goodman inspired. And then I wound up doing these more personal, psychological kind of paintings. And this figure in the middle, in the red there, was a self-portrait for most of the painting. Most of the way through, it was a self-portrait. And it just wasn't quite working. I made myself look a little too debonair, and it was just sort of stupid. And the tonal relationships weren't working. And so I had a friend, Mark House, that was working on one of my studios, and he said he would pose for me. So I got him to pose instead. And so I sort of transposed my self-portrait into this black figure. And then I didn't think that much of it. I had the painting and had done it. It showed once or twice in some museums. But this is the painting that, according to folklore, Amy Sherrill saw when she was a little girl in the Columbus Museum. She saw it. It was hanging in an exhibition there. It would have been in the late 80s, and she was a little girl, and she saw the painting and decided at that moment that she wanted to be an artist when she grew up. So you never know. You never know. This one's called Resurge Renace. It's Resurrection and Rebirth. I was doing this whole life, death, birth, resurrection series at that time, all life-size figures. This is in the Philadelphia Museum, Picasso, Man with Goat. My brother was dying of cancer, and so I did this painting representative of that. It's called Lamb. It's in the Greenville, South Carolina Museum. My friend Terry Beck, who was a dancer here in Philadelphia. Anybody know Terry? Wonderful dancer. He had a dance troupe. He posed for it, and he was a vegetarian, so we had to go down to the Italian market and get a lamb that was freshly... I expected it to have fur and everything, wool, but they couldn't sell it to us that way, and so they had to cut off the hooves and flay it. So it was still warm when he posed, and he was a vegetarian, and he did what he had to do he suffered from my art. But then we took it to a shelter afterwards, and it fed people. But there's an odd Nerdrum and a Rothko side by side. I just enjoyed that pairing there. There's a painting called Fire. I did this down on 2nd and Race Street. I had a studio in Lithographic Services building there under the Ben Franklin Bridge, and did that outside in the parking lot. So I think the main thing that I've learned many things about painting and where we are and what we do and why. But one of the main things that I think that's important is to be able to paint your own backyard. Essentially, it's to paint your own experience. Let your root feed your crown. This is my backyard. It's my brother and myself I'm lying on the ground. This had been woods. When I was a kid growing up behind our house, woods backed up for acres and acres, all the way down to 13th and 13th, which was like a half mile away. And it was just a wild forest that had been there since the beginning of time. There were these mossy paths that went through there, these mossy paths with these big old oak trees that were bigger around than you could reach. And at some point they decided to start to tear that down and to tear those trees down. And they turned it into a field. And they were going to build a shopping center there. But for most of my youth, it was just a field. And this painting is called Fear of Division. And I was fine with math in first and second grade when you could add and subtract and multiply. But when it got to division, it sort of threw my brain for a loop. And I would literally be sitting in class and she'd start talking about division and I'd wind up on the floor. And they'd say, oh, he's having another seizure. And I had like petit mal seizures. But it was this stress of this thing that like threw me onto the floor, like I just couldn't comprehend it. Well, it was also happening at the same time with the Cuban Missile Crisis, where they were teaching us to get on the ground or get in the ditch or get under a desk to protect us from the bomb. That would have worked. So my brother and I were out playing in the field, and this jet stream flew by. See it? You can barely see it here, but there's a jet stream up above him. And I'd never seen a commercial jet stream before, jet liner before, and this jet stream is going through the sky in the west over Alabama, and he starts yelling, "Hit the dirt, it's the end of the world." He tells me it's the bomb, and the bomb is coming. So I'm lying in the gutter there for 30 minutes crying as he keeps screaming, "Hit the dirt, it's the end of the world." Eventually they did build A&P down there. But for most of my life it was the field. And it is the field where I still go every day when I paint. I go to that place. And it's where the grasses are blowing, the wind is blowing the grasses and the sun sets over Alabama. Most of my paintings you see with the field are in that very place in my backyard. This is my son Elliot. He was posing for this painting with this red wagon with the switches. If I was bad when I was a kid, my mom would say, "You wait till your daddy gets home and he's going to spank you with a belt." That's the way it was back then. That's what they did. But if I was really bad, like if I had actually like stolen something, like a rose out of the neighbor's yard or something to bring home to give to her, then she would get really mad because I stole something. And biblically, you can't steal things. So she would say, "You go outside and pick a switch. And you make sure it has little leaves on it so that it'll hurt when I switch you." So I would get punished if she was mad. So in this case, I figure Elliot has all the switches of all the things he's ever done wrong. And he's just dragging them around with him. That's what we do. We just carry our past and carry our sins with us. I like the way the sort of abstraction of the wagon and the switches looks a little bit like him. It's sort of red, and the wheels are like his tennis shoes. But he put his hand on his chest, and he said, and it was just beautiful. It was like some sort of pledge he was making. And I was like, what is that? What's that gesture you're making? And he said, "I have a little heartburn." And so I just stayed with it, and I put it there, and I called the painting Heartland. This is young love. The bride. The fool. I was doing a whole series of tarot cards. Here's the magician. Here are all the major arcana of the tarot card traipsing across a hill, seen in a hypnagogic image. The fool and the bride and the magician. I'd had a review in the New York Times. I had a show. I'd started showing in New York. It must have been 88 and to 90. I was showing the PPOW gallery, and I had a review by one of the senior art critics at the Times, and she said that my paintings were idiotic. That's not something you can refute necessarily. You can't. What are you going to say? No, they're not. I mean, I'm not sure exactly how to refute that, other than proving them otherwise, proving it untrue over a long career. But it was painful. And the gallery said, "We're going to stop showing you for a while." And everything that was lined up to sell, some things that had been selling great, things sort of slowed off and stopped selling. The reviews and articles in the other art magazines sort of dropped away at that point. I had 3 or 4 lined up. So, it was a major career shift for me because I was sort of ascending. And then I got a call. I got a call from Betsy Wyeth, Andrew Wyeth's wife, who had seen me as Rasputin 15 years prior. And she called and she said, "I read your review and I'd like for you to come out and visit." So I did. I had a car at that point. And I drove down to Chadds Ford and I met Betsy Wyeth, and she was so nice. And she and Andrew bought paintings. They started buying paintings, being very supportive. One day she said, "I see here in the back of your bio in your catalog that you make films." I said, "Oh yeah, I make films." Well, I had been to NYU, I'd been to film school, but I'd never really finished a film. I'd done like a few little bad films, student films, black and white about necrophilia and stuff, nothing you'd ever want to see. But I said, "I make films," and you have to realize I wasn't selling anything, so I was like, yeah. And so she said, "I'd like to make a film about Andrew, would you like to help me?" And I said, yes, I would. And so for 5 years, I spent all day, every day with the Wyeths. She paid me $50 an hour, and that was a lot in 1990. And I made this film, Snow Hill. But the most incredible thing about it was learning from Andrew Wyeth. I was sort of thinking maybe the painting thing wasn't going well and I was really struggling, so I wasn't sure when I first came in if I was just going to start to slide into film or something. But by spending 5 years with Andy all day, every day, I really started to see why he painted and how he painted and the reason to paint in the first place. And he said he was just illustrating his life once he really started painting, once his father passed away. So that was when I realized that I learned to draw from Ben Long in Florence. I learned to paint from Nelson Shanks, and then I learned why to paint from Andrew Wyeth. I did this painting called Painter's Crossing of Helga, his model Helga, himself, and Betsy, all traipsing along together. It was just going to be Andy had agreed to pose for me for a portrait. It was just going to be Andy, but my lens on my camera had broken. So when I went out there, I had to stop and pick up another lens at the camera store, and they only had a wide-angle lens. That was all they had. So I put it on there. I'd never used one before. I put it on there, and it was just going to be Andy, and then Helga was standing beside him, so it was like she was in the frame. So I took a couple of pictures, not thinking that much about where it might lead, and it led to this triple portrait. Betsy didn't know what was happening. Andy and Helga both knew it was happening, and they were posing for it. But it was a shock for Betsy when she finally saw it. I asked her, I said, do you mind if I show this? And she said, you can do whatever you want to do with that damn painting. This is the wedding. There's a Tower of Babel. The wedding cake is really a Tower of Babel. You can see it there in the shadow on the dress. And he's distracted, he's the guy, and she's like guiding her, here we go, honey, let's cut the cake. And my favorite part is this little lipstick on the rim. Because I put red lipstick on her lips, and it was too much. I made it too red. So I got my thumb and tried to just take some off, and I looked and I had this little kiss of red lipstick on my thumb. And so I just took it down and put it on the champagne glass, which is half full and half empty. One of the times I was up in Maine with the Wyeths, Betsy Wyeth, it was a perfectly clear day, and she was showing me all the islands, and I was saying, what's that one? And she would name it. What's North Haven, Vinyl Haven? She would name them all. I said, what's that way out there? She said, ooh, that's Matinicus. Never go there. So the very next day, I got a lobsterman to take me out there to see what was so forbidden. And it was a rough place at the time. It was like going back in the 40s. It wasn't gentrified like much of Maine, no white picket fences, but it was a raw, real place. And so I was able to get a little island there. The little island behind this couple is Wheaton Island. So I was able to get a place, and that we've been going there ever since. This is called the Dowry. You can see how it's inspired by Young America by Andrew Wyeth and The Wicked Witch of the West, Elmira Gulch. A lot of things. Wizard of Oz was a big influence as a kid, so Wizard of Oz is a big part of sort of you can't go home again. There's no place like home. Here's Winslow Homer's Fog Warning and my painting, Lifeboat, which I just sort of reversed and took the cod or halibut, whatever that is, out of the boat and just made it a sort of more contemporary dramatic thing. This is called Going Out. This is owned by Steve Martin. It's in Santa Barbara, in his home. My friend David G. and his wife Tiffany, with the trap in between them. The space in between things is as important as the actual figures. Assumption. Sleeper Awake, which is inspired by Ribeiro's painting of Jacob's Dream, climbing Jacob's ladder. Ribeiro was a big influence when I was 18. I'd seen his work in Florence. And so this is Le Ped Boîte, which is actually in Paris. But I'd seen his work, and I wanted to, as an 18-year-old, I wanted to get as good as Ribeiro. It was sort of my mantra. I'm going to go back, get married, have kids, but I want to be as good as Ribeiro. That was like my deal with God that I made, if I would go back and do the right thing. So here's my son, Will. I did this painting up in Maine with him holding the whale bone, that we had found a whale over the rocks. And his name, I named him when he was just a tiny boy, his first day, I named him William Rivera Bartlett, to always remind me. There's a neo-row done after, with a man with a tusk done after my painting. Here's a painting happened after 9/11. I did this painting right after 9/11, and you see the little girl is pulling out war memorabilia out of this box. It's called the box. And my son Elliot, they're sort of playing dress up. They're like a couple, young couple playing dress up, like for a wedding. This is Leviathan. And it's my family, my family growing up, my son Will and Emmanuel in the whale, myself and Elliot and my ex-wife. And you see he's wearing the wrap, man's wearing the wrap. I'd wanted, this is one of those things that's like something I would have drawn on the back of the envelope as a little kid, like how to have the whale and how to have the story so you have the inside of the whale and outside of the whale at the same time. So it's the Jonah story, really. That V on the back of the shirt, my son Man was trying to go to Virginia, and I was trying to find something that would make the painting feel somewhat contemporary, because it felt a little archaic in its presentation. So my son came back from Virginia, Charlottesville, with this V on the back of his T-shirt, and I was like, that's it, right there. So I put that in the middle of the painting. And if you look closely, you can't quite see it. There's a 9 on his shorts, on his sleeve. There's a 9, and that's N-I-N-E, and the Virginia's V-A. So if you were to read it, just visually, it's Nineveh, which is where Jonah was supposed to go to save the city in the biblical story of Jonah. This is Copley's Watson and the shark. You can see how the central apex figure there, the black figure, is representative of where I borrowed this. This is Damien Hirst, something like The Impossibility of Someone Living to Understand What It Means to Be Dead, or something like that is the title. I sort of combined that with Rockwell's Connoisseur. I combined these two and came up with this painting called The Unconscious. He's like Nemo, or he's like the guy on The Truman Show, sort of looking out underneath the surface of things. Your art goes as deep as your love goes, Andrew Wyeth. I was having a show which was traveling, a museum retrospective show. It was here at PAFA in 2004, and it traveled out to Seattle. And these are all images here of the Wizard of Oz, which is what Seattle is known as the Emerald City. So I was going through the tumultuous time in my life, midlife, and this was If I Only Had a Brain. And then here's the Emerald City in Seattle. And when I was there in Seattle, I met Betsy Eby. And here we are together traveling. It's called The Good Traveler. And she's reading the map to see where we need to go next. This is called The Cruel Fair. It's a phrase from Shakespeare, which means love. The love is the cruel fair. This is called Miraculous Outcome. And it was after both of our tumultuous relationships had been married for 30 years in Philadelphia and getting together. Here's The Burning Broom. And Blind Painter, with a young Betsy sort of handing the blind painter the paint bucket. This is Open Gate. This is actually a painting of my grandson, Will's son. And I think that we're always in this place. We're always in this place of decision. All of us. Every second of every day, we're in this moment. And the moment is, the wind has blown the gate open. And it's safe in here. It's real safe in here. But at any moment, we could choose, we could decide to make a turn and go outside the safety of the gate. It's dangerous out there. There's a road and there's cars and there's all sorts of unknowns. But we're in this place. We're in this place all the time. And so it's that moment of decision what we do or don't do. And we have to weigh all those variables at every moment. Open gate. It's really sort of a takeoff on the famous Eggleston photograph. I don't know if you know that, with my grandson sitting on top of the tricycle. It's called America. Allegiance. Commonwealth. Home. I'm sort of crawling on all fours over here, looking a little bit like something out of William Blake, like Nebuchadnezzar, sort of crawling along, looking over around the house toward Alabama. There's a little child in the foreground. It's Betsy, the matriarch. School of Americas. In Columbus, the thing about my hometown is it's a very sort of, it's racially mixed, but there's a fort there, Fort Benning. It's changed its name a few times, Fort Moore, Fort Benning, it's whatever it is now, I'm not sure. Fort Benning again, I think. But they trained the people that went to do Contra work down in South America, they actually trained the people there at the School of the Americas. And so there was a protest. Father Roy Bourgeois had set up a protest where every year in November they would come and protest this school, because he had been down in South America when 4 friends of his, 4 nuns, had been, he'd gone off to get lunch, and when he came back they were slaughtered, they were murdered in the grass in front of his compound. And so he started asking around about who did it, and it turned out it was the American trained soldiers down there. So he began this protest. And so what would happen is these schools would come from all over, St. Joe's, all these schools up north, and they would come down on buses and they would protest at the gates of Fort Benning. And often they would have these massacre reenactments. And so this is actually officially a massacre reenactment. It's not the actual massacre. So it's called School of the Americas. And then this painting is called School of Charm. It's the other side of Columbus, where everybody has the manners. And I actually went to Mabel Bailey's School of Charm. That's what this is. That's actually the A&P that they built across the field out the window. And I learned to sit and walk with a book on my head, and where to put the silverware and how to do the box step. And I learned all of this. And I let Betsy be Mabel Bailey in this picture. That's her putting the book on my niece's head. This is my parents. That space is real. My father had always promised us when I was a kid that he would take us to the New York World's Fair. And so we were so excited, my brother, sister, and I, and then time came to go to the fair, and we didn't go. And we gave him the hardest time. And it was like, why didn't you take us? And he said, things came up, there was reasons why. And so we always ribbed my dad for our whole childhood and his whole life. Don't make promises you can't keep. Many years later, I had a show in New York, and we were successful. We were in a big hotel uptown, and I called down for the car, and my dad and I went down, and we got in the car, and I said, let's go to Flushing Meadows. So I took my dad to the site of the World's Fair, and we stood there side by side. And I said, why didn't you take us? And he said, I couldn't afford it. And I was like, man, what a great father. Like, he never once made us feel like we couldn't afford things. Like, he just never said it. It wasn't pride on his part. It was he didn't want to saddle us with that. So it was just great parenting, I think. So I put myself here as the little child, and that's him as an old man. And you sort of see the shadow of where, if I'd been standing next to him as an adult, my shadow goes across his back, but I'm still the child. This is called Last Portrait. It's a portrait of my dad, who was a World War II pilot over China. Flew P-38s. This is Trophy Day. The light years. Hurricane season. The Gatherer. It's my favorite portrait of Betsy, I think. The Triumph of Romance. Life during wartime. The Whale. the day everything changed forever. This is Eliot. It's actually called Eliot and Chad's Ford. Eliot passed away when he was 27. But Chad's Ford was his favorite place. Halloween. The American. Dominion. The Promised Land. Galilee. I think about the Titanic. I think about people playing instruments as the Titanic went down. I think about us and what we're doing. Diaspora. The Cove. I should have been a pair of ragged claws scuttling across the floors of silent seas. I've heard the mermaids sing each to each, but I do not think they'll sing to me. La Corrida. Zeitgeist. Freedom. Hurtsboro. I used to hitchhike. When I was a teenager, I would hitchhike through the South in the summertime. I would have a job for a little while. I'd save a little bit of money, and then I would just take off. And by some Friday afternoon, I'd be ready to go. I'd be like, have a wild hair, and I'd go out to the edge of town, out on Victory Drive, and I would just stick my thumb up. I wouldn't take anything. I wouldn't take any belongings. And somebody would pick me up, and they would take me wherever they wanted to take me. And the further I went, the better. And I'd go, and I would sometimes I'd wind up down in Miami from Columbus, Georgia, just staying with strangers or riding in strange cars. I remember one time coming back up the coast, and I got a ride with this woman who gave me $5. I remember every single ride I ever got. I remember the people that gave me the rides, and I remember what happened in the cars. And this woman gave me $5 and said, I have a son that hitchhikes, and I know you probably need a sandwich. And I did. I needed a sandwich. And then she took me as far as over near Apalachicola. And then from there, it was late at night. It was a dark night, midnight. And you don't usually get a ride, but I just wanted to keep going. And so I decided to stick my hand out along the road, and not many cars were passing. It was down in the Gulf of Mexico. And this car stopped. And it was a black car, an old Mercury with those old rounded hood wells, the wheel wells. And I look inside and I can't see anybody. And it's a car full of black guys. It's 5 black guys already, 5. And I look in and they say, you want to ride? And I'm like, I'm just like this little James Taylor looking guy. And I'm like, yeah, sure. So I get in the back. They have a pot of crabs, steaming crabs that they've just either stolen from somewhere or their uncle had a crab joint or something. Anyway, so it's steaming, it's hot, and they put it on my lap, and it's super hot. So there's 4 of us in the back and 2 in the front, and we're just driving along the Gulf of Mexico on this small road, and they're reaching back and grabbing the crabs and throwing them out the window, and they're drinking beer and listening to Motown, and I'm hearing stuff I've never heard before, and they ask me what I like, and I tell them, and we have this moment of connection as we drive along the highway, the 2-lane blacktop along the Gulf of Mexico. Eventually, they let me out somewhere way over near Biloxi or somewhere. And I always wondered where they went and what they did next. And so I did this painting called Hurtsboro of these guys on the beach the next morning somewhere along the Gulf of Mexico. Steven Spielberg saw the painting and he was going to buy it, and he measured it, and he had a new yacht that he was going to put it in, and it was just about 3 inches too long. So I got to say, you're going to have to get a bigger boat. Instead, he bought the study for it. He bought the small study, which is on the boat. Oh, yeah, this is like retirement. This is where I am in my life now. This is the old guy up on the beach. The old guy sitting on the beach just resting. When I was a little boy, The reason I wanted to become an artist, I know the reason I wanted to become an artist. When I was a little boy, my mother and father had been down to La Francesca. It was a motel on the beach near Panama City, Florida. And it was the end of our 3-day stay. And my mom said, I want to just go out one more time and look at the ocean before we leave. So my dad was in the parking lot. I go with my mom, and we go down to the beach. And standing on the beach was this artist. And he looked like Johnny Mathis. You know, he was tan with white shirt and white trousers rolled up upon the beach. And he was painting a painting. And my mom looked at him with so much love, like, that's what I want. And I was just a little boy holding her hand. I look up at her, I look over at him, and I'm like, I know what I want to be when I grow up. So my beach paintings relate to that. My beach paintings relate to the very core of why I do what I do. The skippers. I've just got a couple more paintings here to show you, and this is a recent painting. This was just in my show in New York, and it's called Home Front, and it's Betsy and her friend Lark. Betsy had been posing for a long time. Betsy's been posing for 20 years or so, and she's an artist in her own right, and I was doing some paintings. Can I tell this story, Betsy? Okay, thanks. I was going to tell it anyway, probably, but thanks. So I was doing some paintings that weren't, like, they were romantic, okay? Like, she looked great, and she was my muse. And I didn't let her see them. She'd pose for them, but I've been working on them for a while. So I invited her into the studio, and she saw them, and she's like, I don't know. I'm like, what do you mean you don't know? She's like, well, I don't know. I'm in a different stage of my life now, like, I'm a mature woman, a successful painter, and so I'm not so sure about this. So we went round and round. We had a big fight about it. Yeah. And so eventually she said, and I was like, if I can't paint you, what can I paint? Like, I'm in love. Like, I want to paint my love. That's what I have to do. Your art goes as deep as your love goes, right? So what do I do? She said, well, you can paint me, but upright and clothed. So this was my painting of Betsy and her friend Lark, upright and clothed. Every painting has a joke title. This one was, Don't F With Us. So here was another painting from last summer, not upright, but clothed. And another called Wild Love. Okay, so just a few more paintings here, but I want to talk just for a minute before we get to some of my favorite paintings of all time, my 4 favorite paintings that I've done. Idea, Energy, and Power. Has anyone ever read, and I will bet $1. No, I would bet 10, no, I don't have any money. I'll bet $1. Do we have $1, Betsy? Okay, we're going to bet. I'm going to bet no one's read this book. But if you have, if you haven't, you could raise your hand just for fun and mess with me. But if you have, God bless you. It's called The Mind of the Maker by Dorothy L. Sayers. Oh, we got one! Excellent. Yeah, it's an amazing book. Highly recommended. Probably hard to find. The Mind of the Maker by Dorothy L. Sayers. Dorothy L. Sayers was basically sort of a friend of C.S. Lewis and wrote mystery novels like Agatha Christie kind of novels. That's what she's sort of known for. But this is for her philosophy book. It was about how we think about creativity. And she had a triangle of idea, energy, and power. So the idea of a painting, the idea of a concept of a painting has to be in balance with the energy or the amount of work that goes into it for it to have strong power. It's sort of a little bit tricky about how to think about it in terms of painting, but because she talks about playwriting, novel writing, painting, dance, everything. Things having to be in power and balance to be in power. There's scalene triangle would be an example of something that's out of power. So you have maybe a big idea, but you don't want to put all the work into it. Maybe like William Blake or something. Not to diss on William Blake himself, because William Blake was awesome. But you have a big idea, like a really big idea about God or something. But then you sort of do a watercolor or a little pencil sketch of it or something over here. So it's sort of out of balance in terms of like what the power of the finished work is. It has to be in balance with itself to have the most amount of power. And it can be at all different levels. It can have just a small idea and then a small amount of work, and it still can be in balance and power. Like Keith Haring or something, you have like a little idea of a barking dog, and then you do a little sketch of the bark coming out, sort of like, it works, it's powerful. So all different layers of style. It isn't about style, it's about idea and energy being in balance with itself to create the power. I think about that a lot when I work. A sketch can be just as strong as a big finished painting based on if it's in balance with itself. And I think about that when I look at all other people's work as well. Here are my 4 favorite paintings. This is Hiroshima. So I'd been reading John Hersey's Hiroshima, the book Hiroshima. I had won a Pew. I was so lucky. Like in 1993, they just started giving the Pew grant out, and had done some big paintings. I'd done some paintings I spent a lot of time on, and they were having the classes where they were teaching the artists how to apply for the Pew so you could win it, like how to grant application stuff. And so all the other artists were going and they were reading how to apply and how to say the right thing so you would win. Well, I sort of didn't do that part. And so I stayed in my studio and just kept painting, kept making the best paintings I could make. And so I realized it was the day before the application was due, and I was like, and I had some photos taken, so I was prepared for that, but I hadn't written anything or even thought about it. Like, what would I say? Because I figured it was pie in the sky. I wasn't going to win a Pew anyway. There were a lot of great artists in town. And so I start to get the application, and I realize I have to fill out and say what I'm going to do. So I say I'm going to do paintings about war, not heroic war, but like how it affects women and children and families. So I say that, and then they say, why should you be the one to win? And I go to my wife and my ex-wife, and I ask her, would you help me type this up? I have to have this ready tomorrow. And she's like, no way, you're in this, you do this. So I did. I couldn't type, but I got a Royal typewriter, and I fed the thing down, and then I was like, I want to win. That basically that's what I said. I didn't say anything. I just want to win. And then I said, thank you very much for giving this award. And so it somehow, miraculously, I won the Pew. I asked years later, I did find somebody that was on that board, on that committee, and I asked her, I said, like, why did I win? There was like a lot of really great artists there. And she said, because you said thank you. Like everybody else just said all the things that, like why they should win, and you actually said thank you, even though I hardly said anything else. And the thank you was what did it, according to her. But I had read John Hersey's Hiroshima, and in the book, the woman is all about the survivors of Hiroshima, the people who did survive the bombing in August 1945. And so in one story, a woman standing in her kitchen looking out over the street where there's a house across the way where the neighbor is tearing the shingles off their house, shingle by shingle. Because the mayor had set out a decree saying that people along certain avenues should tear their houses down. Because if there was a bomb, a conventional bomb, then the whole town wouldn't burn. So she's watching her neighbor tear the house down. When suddenly, the all clear had sounded that morning from no bombs, and then suddenly this yellow boom. She wakes up 20, 30 minutes later. She stands up and shakes the shingles off of her body, and her house is gone, her neighbor's house is gone, every house in every direction is gone. Her children that were laying on the floor behind her are gone. Everything's gone. She's just standing in the middle of this wasteland. So I started the painting that way. I actually started the painting in this destruction. And then as I was working on it, it was so depressing. And I couldn't, it was black and white, grisaille, and I couldn't finish it. And then it hit me that I could back time up just a little bit to the moment before the bomb was actually dropped. And a beautiful August morning, and she's standing out in a field, and she can hear the sound of the Enola Gay coming with the bomb in it. And we hold it forever. We hold that moment forever. The carp kite, which is a symbol for courage, is like a windsock for the wind. The vanishing point is actually the peace memorial that was ground zero, if you follow the vanishing point all the way back into the distance. Mira Nakashima posed for the central figure. homeland. I got all my friends in a big truck, and I wanted to represent the scene of the Battle of Saint-Lô, which was in World War II. And it was one of the battles where they drove the Nazis, the Germans, out of in Normandy, drove them back. And the people had been outside the village waiting for it. And when they finally come back into the village, they don't know it, but their village is completely destroyed. In the process of liberating it, it was destroyed, so it's gone. And you can't go home again. Nothing's ever the same. It has always changed because we have woken up and we've seen the difference. And so in this case, the central figure is waving the white peace flag, and all of my friends are around in the... This is Goddess. Everyone that came in my studio over the 6 months that it took me to paint this worked on it. So the whole foreground is worked on by all of my friends. It's a communal painting.
What's the size of that, Bo?
Oh my gosh. It's like 12 or 14 feet tall maybe, and 20 something feet. So it's like a giant mother head, where I just wanted you to feel like when the moment you were born and you looked up and you saw your mother's head for the first time, it's so big when you stand in front of it. It's in a home in Jackson Hole, actually, a private home. And this is the last painting. It's God. And it was purchased by the Princess of Saudi Arabia. It was in Mecca for a long time. Now it's actually in Paris, and it's available for sale if you want it. It's also probably 15 feet tall and 30 feet wide or something. I think that you should paint larger than you can reach, I mean, both literally and figuratively. This was actually the painting that the New York Times critic called idiotic. So we don't know. You just never know. You live your life, you paint your paintings, you don't know where it's going to lead or what's going to happen. It's a great mystery. Life itself is a great mystery. And we all have our own stories. And I think our goal, our job, is to tell them and to not hold back. And whether that's in whatever form it might take, whether it's in painting or whether it's in story form or dressmaking or dancing or music, whatever it is, whatever we feel slightly inclined to do, we should trust that instinct. So when you're a little kid and you're drawing on the back of a bulletin, it's part of who we are. And we need, I think, more than anything else, especially in these times, we need to trust that. We need to trust the process of the creative urge which flows from the divine in us and through us, and then it will ripple away from us. It will ripple away from us and make the whole thing a better place. Thank you. If you have a question, I think we can ask. Yes, there's someone back there. Thanks. Thanks so much for coming today. I appreciate you being here.
All right, first question. Yeah.
Hi, Bo.
Hey.
My name is Nicholas. You gave me a critique last year in my studio, and you told me to let my root feed my crown. At the time, I didn't know what it meant, and I just thought it was very esoteric. But now I think at this point in my life, I'm coming to a point of understanding. So when it comes to your work, you often place your figures of immense presence low on the horizon, juxtaposed against often an atmospheric twilight sky connecting earthly life with the dream or spirit realm. These figures appear monolithic in their nature. Do you believe your message of the collective power found in love and balance may be lost on the younger generation due to the egocentric, individualistic nature that Western provincialism breeds?
I love your question.
I have a follow-up if we can.
Yeah. No, it's fabulous. Yes. We are in a predicament.
Yeah.
We are. I joke with Betsy that I'm just going to throw my phone in the ocean because we need to connect again. We need to figure out some way to connect again in real life, IRL. We need to find a way. And because we're so siloed and we're so just reinforcing our own belief systems by what we look at and what we take in, we don't even know what's real anymore. We're in a post-truth world and we don't know what's real anymore. And so how to find that, I mean, Betsy and I are fortunate enough to go to an island in Maine for, 4 months out of the year where we can unplug and be in real life. Is it escapist? It might be. Is it, but when we're not there, we try to, we recharge our batteries there. We try to engage in the problems of the world that we feel like we need to try to engage with. But there needs to be some, I mean, Ken Wilber talks, I don't know if I talked to you at all about Ken Wilber when we had that meeting, but maybe we could talk about that a little bit. Ken Wilber has a theory of integral spiral dynamics where we need to try to understand the many different ways of perceiving reality. So, we want to get our basic needs met. It's sort of like a hierarchy. We want to get our basic needs met. And then there's ways of interacting where we are tribal, like, this is my group, this is my team, this is my school, we're all together, or my family. And there's a tribal worldview, and there's a sort of a religious worldview where it's like, my book says this, and this is what I'm going to live by. And then there's a scientific worldview where, like, if we could just break everything down to the smallest atom or name the furthest galaxy, then we can understand what all this is. There's many different worldviews, and he believes that we get to a point where the sort of I'm okay, you're okay worldview, where it's like, I can think what I think, you can think what you think, and we're okay, we're fine, right? But he thinks actually that's the problem, because everybody can't be okay, because sometimes some ideas are actually better than other ideas. And you have to be able to think with clarity in order to say that some ideas are better than other ideas. And so that's a dangerous spot, is where we sort of find ourselves right now. Each one of these different spirals has a color, it's all color coded, but you get up to the yellow realm, which is the integral realm, which is what he calls it, where you have to really be able to, not because of ego and not because of might makes right, or some of the lower chakra, lower level spirals, but you have to actually say it because of what's good for the whole system, and we have to be able to call that out. And we're at a place where we really need to be making these decisions. These are hard decisions to make about how to act in such a way that's good for the whole system, and say things that are good for the whole system, not just to prop up our own ego and our own position. And that above that is a kind of holistic, I'm not sure quite how to grok it, but there's a holistic way of being where everything we do, everything we say actually serves the whole system. It'd be nice to be able to get there. Maybe Buddha or Jesus or somebody was there. I don't know who was there. But there's a way of being in which the food you eat or don't eat, the car you drive and the shoes you wear, and everything you say is all to serve the betterment of humanity and the betterment of the whole in a very true and real way. And I think that we're sort of called to try to find that psychological evolution within ourselves. It's not a biological evolution, but we can actually, by caring more, rise up to being that way in the world. And I think that's what we're called to do, to serve the whole. Was there a follow-up question?
Yeah, your answer was, no need for the second question, but I'm going to put myself out there. I have a poem that I wrote that I would love to share with you at some point if possible.
Okay. Yeah, great, I would love that. Do we have time for it, or do you want to do it in private?
Maybe private.
Okay, let's. I look forward to reading it. Thank you. Thank you.
Other questions for Bo? Yes.
Thank you. So I'm from El Salvador, and I'm familiar with the School of the Americas.
Mm-hmm.
And that painting really, really stood out to me. So I wanted to say thank you.
Thank you.
Because you brought up the importance of saying thank you. But my my question is, the mother painting with the quilt that you shared was a collaborative endeavor. Have you done that often, or is this the only one that's kind of brought people
This-
together in that way?
Yeah,
And
thanks.
if you could just speak a little to the experience of that.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, yeah, it was a very powerful experience to be able to, and I told people, I said, what you put down might not wind up in the final painting because I have to keep making decisions, aesthetic decisions about what we show in the end. But it's all layered and it'll all be there as part of it. But I kept as much as I could. And so children worked on it, parents worked on it, people who had never painted worked on it, friends came over who were painters and worked on it. And it was an abstract painting for most of its process. I wound up just in the end putting the head on it, putting the mother head up there, knowing I was ahead in that direction, but that I just wanted it to be this big, giant, beautiful shape of togetherness of all. If that answers the question. Yeah, thank you. Was there one here?
Yeah, it's not smart, esoteric, it's more practical. We're all artists.
Yes.
Do you always work from life, or do you ever take photographs of a scene of the people and then working?
Yeah, I do everything. You know, I learned to draw when I was young, so you know I know that I can draw, and I draw all the time. I draw every day from life. But often in paintings, I stage them the way Rockwell would have staged one. So you know, and Rockwell always said there are no shortcuts, which is true. You can't like just start painting realistically if you don't know how to draw. You know, you got to do the work, and then you own it, and you have ownership of it, and you're not like feeling like a imposter syndrome. You're not faking it. But I'll use anything and every means to make the image that I want to make. There's no rules. I think there are any rules in art. It's like what matters is if the thing holds the energy in the end or not. If the thing holds the life force that you're trying to get out, because it continues to exist once we're gone. I mean, it'll last as long as there's an earth and a museum to hold it, you know, and protect it. Then you know it'll last for generations. And so I think it's important for us to be able to put our life force into it, not stress about like. Whether we painted it from life or not, because it's our whole life, it's our whole being, all our knowledge and experience that goes into it. I think, does that sort of answer?
Yes, and thank you.
You're welcome, thank you.
I don't actually have a question. I just want to thank you. I have one of your paintings.
Oh, thank you.
I have the self-portrait of you cooking a lobster in a pot. And I enjoy it every day. It's in the middle of my dining, it's on the wall of my dining room, and it's just a fantastic painting.
God bless you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think that I just wanted to end with, there's this Rumi quote, and the Rumi quote goes like this. It goes, somewhere out there, beyond ideas of right doing and wrongdoing, there is a field. I'll meet you there. And that field for me is my backyard. That field is where I grew up. And I'm there every afternoon from noon to 6, working in that place and trying to find that timeless place that's home, that timeless place that's like heaven, where time does not exist and I'm invisible and the work is just getting done and I'm getting out of its way. And that's the field. And there's no judgment. And we just have to do the work and trust it and get out of its way and let the great creativity of all flow through us.
Thank you so much for coming, everyone. You can see one of Bo Bartlett's self-portraits in A Nation of Artists in the Historic Landmark Building, which is open tomorrow and through the weekend. So please come back and see it, and thank you for coming.
That was fun.
Thanks.
I'm Kitty Farnham. My good friend Susan Slides to know from Columbus has taken me several times whenever I'm in Columbus, which is about every 5 years, to go see her paintings wherever they are. And recently I saw her. She's been my dad. She said, please say hello. Kitty.
We love Susan. This is friend of Susan Christine.
Susan and I went to college. We had a freshman year. And so I've just been in Columbus. I was telling him that every time I visit her in Columbus,